Hey, welcome to Lessons from the Boot. I'm your host, Ms. Brittany, and every week I dive deep into the personal growth and development that living here in South Italy teaches me, in the hope that you can gain some inspiration from it wherever you may be in the world. "1% can change your future." In the words of Stephen Bartlett in his book, The Diary of a CEO, that is probably the most significant sentence that you could ever read. It's not a new concept for me because having read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he also talks about this 1% principle and how 1% improvements compound over time in the same way that interest compounds, and you end up with a much larger significant improvement at the end of it, based on the back of all of those small, seemingly insignificant ones. But what was different in Stephen Bartlett's book was the fact that he referenced a Japanese philosophy called Kaizen. Kaizen essentially means continuous improvement, and it is the philosophy that incremental improvements lead to greater change. They lead to greater outcomes, and essentially they lead to a much better result. Now, this principle I really agree with and adopt in my own life in many different ways. Most recently, I've adopted this principle when it comes to language learning. Language learning is an interesting area because I think if you type into Google that you want to learn a particular language, you will find a vast array of videos with people telling you that you can learn a language anywhere from 4 weeks up to 3 months and beyond. But what's important when it comes to language learning is consistency. And I think sometimes people have a very traditional mindset when it comes to learning, in the sense that they feel they have to dedicate a large amount of time or a large chunk of time to study in the language. Whereas I have seen, especially through my own experiences, how that simply isn't true. And how, especially if you're learning a language as an adult with a job, commitments, responsibilities, and you're juggling all of those at the same time, sometimes it's not physically possible to have that large chunk of time available to be able to study. And so this is when it's important to be able to adopt this 1% principle and instead choose to study in smaller increments and see how that compounds over the course of a week, a month, or even a year. And this is exactly what I have done with my Italian. So I've been on this real journey with learning Italian, and as I now enter my 6th year of living in Italy, I've kind of just had a bit of a chat with myself and been like, now is the time you're going to do this. You're going to master this language. You know so much more than you realize. And I have, for the month of January, consistently been studying Italian for between 15 to 30 minutes every single morning. And, you know, when you look at it on a surface level, 15 to 30 minutes a day doesn't sound like a lot. But when you compound that over the course of nearly 5 weeks, that is more study than I've done maybe over the course of the previous 5 months. And this is what I mean about compound interest and how this 1% philosophy and Kaizen can really make a huge difference in your life, whatever your focus may be. But I also think I really like the continuous improvement philosophy of Kaizen, because in life, sometimes we stay in situations that aren't right for us, as I've spoken about in many other podcast episodes, but also sometimes we return back to situations because they feel comfortable, because they feel sure, because we feel secure. Except those situations are not helping you to develop. They are not helping you to move forward in your life. They are keeping your life exactly the same as it was and as it will be for many years to come. Now, I've experienced this myself in the past with jobs. I've left a job, I've gone on to do something else, and then because I remembered what a great time I had in my previous job, I've returned back to that job only to realize that it was completely different. And the same joy that I once felt before had gone because the people I worked with had changed, the atmosphere had changed, the management had changed, and it was just a totally different atmosphere. And this is why, as well, people say you should never go back. You should always keep moving forward, onwards, because what you've experienced in the past is what you've experienced. You can't go back and repeat that same experience again. Everything changes. Life is constantly in flux. And so when we consider returning back to an old situation because we have comforting memories or because we think it's going to do us some good, often it doesn't, because everything has changed. It's not what we remembered it to be. And this is where this principle of continuous improvement and development really kicks in. Because if you are continuously improving your life, you are constantly moving forward. You are not looking back. You are not returning back to situations that you left in the first place for whatever reason. You are looking forward and you are looking at what is to come, and you are working on yourself in the smallest ways possible. This law of Stephen Bartlett's book, The Diary of a CEO, is entitled "You Must Sweat the Small Stuff." And I think this is something that we really overlook as a society. We are so blinded by the big gestures and the big actions and the hard work and the hustle that we have to put in if we want to achieve something in life, that often we overlook the very simple, small actions that could lead us to the end goal we want in a much more efficient and effective way. And I think this is what I really wanted to focus on today, because I see this happening all around me every single day. I see it reflected in my own life through the things that I'm working on at the moment. And I just realize how important this principle really is. You don't have to make big, grand gestures to achieve the things that you want. Take small, tiny baby steps every single day towards what you want. And before you know it, you're going to be looking back and realizing just how far you've come. I think something that was mentioned in this particular part of the book that is so true is the fact that we look at innovations and we look at people's achievements, and sometimes we think it's like an overnight success. Oh goodness, look, that person has suddenly really blown up and they've got this incredible company and they're making an absolute killing. But the reality is that often we don't realize the blood, sweat and tears that went into something, those small steps, those everyday maneuvers and decisions that people had to make to be able to arrive at the point they're at now, often is overlooked. Because as a society, as I said before, we are all about the outcome. We're all about the grand gestures, that often we don't pay attention to the work that is really required to arrive there. And that work is often through small steps, but we don't often use this principle enough. And this is when problems occur in companies, in projects, in plans, because we overlook the small stuff. The small stuff is the difference. If you are consistently looking to improve your environment, improve your company, improve yourself, improve your life, whatever it may be, you've got to sweat the small stuff. You've got to be interested in the tiniest of details, and you've got to make that 1% commitment to yourself. It's the single most important commitment you can make. I've said it before in many other episodes. Other people are fickle. If your motivation, if your drive comes from other people, you have no control over your life. One day people can be your friends. The next day they're not. One day people support your dreams. The next day they're not interested. Your commitment has to be for yourself, from yourself. And if other people follow you on that journey, that's a blessing. And if they don't, it's not a problem. But the important thing is that you make that commitment to yourself, that 1% commitment to make that change. And it comes solely from you and not from those around you. I think this is probably the most incredible principle that you can adopt in your life, whatever you want to work on. Make a 1% difference. Take that 1% step. Make that 1% change every single day and see where that leads you. I'll see you in the next episode.